The county pays me to look at water. I have done it for 11 years. I can tell you how long a flood sat in a room by the smell of the drywall. I can tell you which wall was hit first by the way the paint lifts. I can read a tide line the way a doctor reads an X-ray, and in 11 years of reading them, I have never been wrong about which direction the water came from, or how high it got, or when it left. 4 months ago, I walked into a basement in the south end of the county on a routine flood assessment. The carpet was dry, the furniture was dry, the pilot light on the furnace was lit, and running around the entire perimeter of the room, 3/4 of an inch below the joists, was a clean, level, unbroken high water line stained into every tile of the drop ceiling. The water had filled that basement to the ceiling. It had held there long enough to mark itself. And then it had left without touching a single thing below it. The house was not supposed to have a basement. The county record said slab on grade. The satellite imagery showed no exterior access. The woman who lived there, who was 81 years old and had been widowed for 19 years, told me twice on her front porch that she did not have one. Then she went into the kitchen, came back with a key on a piece of green yarn, and handed it to me without a word. I am going to tell you what I found down those stairs, and what was written on the paper in her side table drawer, and why I have started waking up at 3:14 in the morning, and why there is a phone number in my own handwriting in a notebook in my house that I do not remember writing. I am telling you because the woman who kept that room is 81 years old, and her knees are going, and she lives alone, and the rules say there has always been someone. And right now there is not someone. And I have not decided yet whether the someone is going to be me. I am telling you because if you are the kind of person who looks up in basements, you should know that the room is still down there, and the level is still holding, and somebody is going to inherit the key. I am a flood damage assessor for a small county in the southern part of the state, and my job is to walk into buildings after they have been swamped and write down what the water did. I measure the height of the stain on the drywall. I photograph the warp in the floorboards. I note the smell, because the smell tells you how long the water sat and whether anything organic was in it. I check the insulation for saturation, the joists for rot, the foundation for hairline cracks that were not there last year. Then I open a laptop on the hood of my truck, and I file a report that determines whether a family gets a check, a denial, or a polite letter telling them their loss did not meet the threshold. I came to this work from construction, which I came to from the Navy, which I came to from a small town 2 counties over, where my father did roughly the same job for roughly the same wages. I am not a man given to imagination. I am given to clipboards and tape measures and a kind of patient looking that most people find boring. My wife says I notice the wrong things at parties. I notice the baseboards. I notice where the paint was touched up after a leak. I notice the faint tide line on a kitchen cabinet that tells me the dishwasher failed 2 summers ago, and nobody mentioned it to the buyers. I am telling you all of this so you understand that when I say I saw watermarks on a basement ceiling, I do not mean a stain. I do not mean a discoloration from a pipe. I mean the high water line. The flat, level, unmistakable horizontal band that water leaves when it sits in a space long enough to settle. I have seen 10,000 of them. I know what they look like in plaster, in drywall, in concrete block, in wood paneling, in the old horsehair stuff you still find in farmhouses built before the war. I know how the line tilts when a house has shifted on its slab. I know how it doubles when the water rose, fell, and rose again. I know how it fades into a ghost over a decade, and how it sharpens for the first week after the event. The flood that summer was not the worst we had ever had, but it was the most uneven. A slow system parked over the eastern half of the county for 3 days, and dropped what the Weather Service later called a once-in-40-year rainfall on about 1/3 of our service area. The rest of us got drizzle. That meant my caseload doubled overnight, but stayed geographically concentrated, which is the easiest kind of bad week. I could run a route. I could hit 8 houses in a day if the driveways cooperated. The address came to me on the 4th morning, batched in with 11 others on a printed sheet from the office. We still print the sheets. The county tried to go paperless in 2018 and gave up after 6 months because the field signal is unreliable in the bottoms, and nobody wants to drive back to town to confirm an appointment. The address was on a road I knew, a long county route that follows a creek down toward the river. lined with the kind of houses that were built cheap in the 70s and have been patched ever since. I had assessed 3 properties on that road already that week. All 3 had taken between 18 and 26 inches of water on the ground floor. Standard creek flood pattern. Predictable. The house I'm telling you about sat at the lowest point of the road, in a bowl where 2 drainages meet. By every rule I know about water and gravity, it should have been the worst hit property on the route. I expected to find the homeowner sitting on a porch with ruined furniture in the yard and a face I have seen 1,000 times, the face of someone who has just learned what their insurance actually covers. Instead, I found a tidy single-story ranch with a dry yard, a dry porch, and a woman in her 60s who opened the door before I knocked and said, very politely, that she had not called us. She said it the way you tell a delivery driver they have the wrong house. No anger. A little apology in her voice, like she was sorry to waste my time. I checked the sheet. The address matched. The name on the sheet matched the name on the mailbox. The claim number was in the system. I pulled it up on the laptop right there on her porch and read her the intake summary. Reported flooding in finished basement. Requested assessment. Homeowner available between 9 and 4 weekdays. She listened to all of that with her hands folded in front of her, and then said, again very politely, that she did not have a basement. I have had this conversation before. People misremember their own houses under stress. People file claims their adult children file for them without telling them. People confuse this house with the rental they own across the county. I asked if I could come in and take a look, just to close out the file properly, and she said of course, and stepped aside. The house was clean in the way that old people's houses are clean. Vacuum lines in the carpet, a bowl of hard candy on the coffee table, photographs on every wall, mostly of the same 2 children at different ages, and a husband who appeared in the older photos and not in the newer ones. The air smelled like coffee and the kind of lemon cleaner my mother used to buy. There was a door in the hallway between the kitchen and the back bedroom that did not match the other doors. The other doors were 6-panel, painted a soft cream. This door was flat, hollow core, painted the same cream but more recently, and it had a small brass deadbolt above the knob. The deadbolt was the giveaway. You do not put a deadbolt on an interior door unless something is on the other side of it that you want to keep separate from the rest of your life. I asked her what was behind that door. She looked at it for a long moment, the way you look at a relative you have not seen in years and are trying to place. And then she said it was just storage. She said her husband had built it. She said she did not go in there. I asked if I could. She said yes, but she did not move to unlock it. She went into the kitchen and came back with a key on a piece of green yarn and handed it to me without comment. Then she sat down in the living room and turned on the television, and I understood that she was not going to come with me. The deadbolt turned smoothly. The door opened onto a set of wooden stairs going down. I want to be clear about what I knew at this moment. I knew that the county property records, which I had pulled up on my laptop on her porch, listed this address as a slab-on-grade single-story residence with no subsurface structures. I knew that the satellite imagery showed no exterior basement access, no bulkhead, no window wells. I knew that the topography of the lot, which I had read off the contour map that morning, did not support a basement at this elevation without significant pumping. I knew that the woman who owned this house had told me twice that she did not have a basement. I went down the stairs anyway, because that is the job. The basement was finished. Drop ceiling with acoustic tiles, the kind with the little holes in them. Beige carpet, low pile, the kind you put in a rec room. Wood paneling on the walls, the dark fake stuff that was popular when I was a kid. A plaid couch against one wall, a coffee table in front of it. A console television on a rolling stand. A bookshelf with paperbacks. A small bar in the corner with 3 stools. A pinball machine, unplugged, dusty. A model train layout on a sheet of plywood mounted on sawhorses, half finished, with a little town painted on the board, and tracks laid out around it, and a few buildings glued down, and a few still in their boxes beside the layout. It was a man's basement. The kind of room a man builds for himself in his 50s, and finishes piece by piece on weekends, and never quite gets done with before he runs out of time. There was no water on the floor. The carpet was dry under my boots. I knelt and pressed my palm into it and felt no give, no damp, no chill. The baseboards were intact. The bottom edges of the paneling were intact. There was no swelling at the base of the bar, no warping at the legs of the couch. The model train layout, which would have floated and tipped at the first inch of water, sat exactly level on its sawhorses. I looked up because looking up is part of the routine. You check the ceiling for water damage from above, for plumbing leaks, for HVAC condensation, for anything that might be feeding into the room from somewhere else. The drop ceiling tiles were stained. Not one tile, not two. Every tile in the room in the same pattern, with the same intensity. A flat horizontal band of brown discoloration running along the bottom edge of each tile, perfectly level, perfectly continuous from one tile to the next, as if the stain had been painted on with a straight edge. Above the band, the tiles were clean. Below the band, in the 3/4 of an inch of tile that hung below the staining, the tiles were also clean. I have spent 11 years looking at tide lines. This was a tide line. The water had filled this basement to within 3/4 of an inch of the joists, held that level long enough to deposit minerals and organics into the porous surface of the tile, and then had left without wetting anything below it. I stood there for a long time. I am not proud of how long. I stood there with my clipboard against my chest, and I tried to construct a sequence of events that produced what I was looking at, and I could not. Water does not retreat upward. Water does not leave a room through the ceiling without disturbing what is between the floor and the ceiling. Water does not stain only the top 3/4 of an inch of a room and leave the lower 7 feet untouched. I took photographs. I took 28 of them. I measured the stain line at 4 points around the room with my laser and confirmed it was level to within a 1/16 of an inch. I lifted one of the ceiling tiles out of its grid and turned it over in my hands. The staining went through the full thickness of the tile, top and bottom, the way it does when a tile has been submerged. The back of the tile was dry. The insulation above the tile was dry. The joists above the insulation were dry. I put the tile back. I went upstairs. The woman was watching a game show with the volume low. I asked her as gently as I could whether there had ever been flooding in the basement. She said no, not that she knew of. I asked her when her husband had finished the basement. She said he never finished it. She said he passed before the trains were done. I asked her when he had passed. She said 19 years ago this November. I drove back to the office that afternoon, and I did not file the report. I told my supervisor the visit had been a misunderstanding, that the homeowner had no damage and no claim, and that I needed to recheck the intake. He shrugged and told me to close it out however I wanted. He was 3 weeks from retirement, and he had stopped caring about anything that did not involve his pension. I closed the file as a no-damage visit. I did not mention the basement. I did not upload the photographs. I told myself I would look at them at home, on my own time, and figure out what I had actually seen before I put anything official in the system. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of bourbon, and I went through the photographs one by one on my laptop. The stain was real. It was in every frame, from every angle, at the same height. In one of the photographs you can see my reflection in the dark screen of the unplugged television, holding the camera up, and behind me the line on the tiles runs unbroken across the wall. I went into the office the next morning and I pulled the claim intake. The claim had been filed by phone. The intake operator had logged the call at 6:14 in the morning on the day after the rain stopped. The caller had identified himself by name, had given the correct address, had described flooding in a finished basement, had requested an assessment, and had provided a callback number. The name the caller had given was not the name of the woman who lived in the house. It was a different name, a man's name. I called the callback number from my desk. It rang 4 times and went to a voicemail greeting that was just the automated voice reading the digits back. I hung up without leaving a message. I wrote the number down on a sticky note and put it in my wallet. Then I did the thing I should not have done. I pulled the property history. The county keeps deed records going back to the 1860s on microfiche in the basement of the courthouse, and digitized versions of everything since 1994 on the assessor's server. I pulled the digital records first. The house had been purchased by the woman and her husband in 1981. It had been transferred to her name alone in 2006, which matched what she had told me about her husband's death. There were no other transfers. There were no permits for a basement addition. There were no permits for any work below grade. The property card listed the structure as slab on grade and had listed it that way since the original assessment in 1981. I went down to the courthouse on my lunch break and I pulled the microfiche. The lot had been part of a larger parcel until the late 70s, when it was subdivided for the housing development that the road now runs through. Before that, it had been farmland. Before that, it had been farmland. Before that, on the oldest map I could find, it had been marked with a small square symbol and the words Ice House in a careful 19th century hand. An ice house, in that part of the country, in that period, would have been a partially subterranean structure used to store blocks of ice cut from the creek in winter and packed in sawdust to keep through the summer. The square on the map was sited at the lowest point of the original parcel, in the bowl where two drainages meet. I sat in the courthouse basement with the microfiche reader humming, and I thought about a man in his 50s in 1981, buying a cheap new house on a cheap new lot and discovering, when he went to put in a garden or run a French drain or just dig a post hole for a clothesline, that there was a void under his yard. An old fieldstone chamber, half collapsed, lined with the cold that fieldstone holds. I thought about a man who had been a hobbyist, a model train builder, a finisher of basements, looking down into that void and seeing a project. I thought about him shoring it up over a decade of weekends, pouring a floor, framing walls inside the stone, running an extension cord down from the kitchen outlet, hanging a drop ceiling to hide the joists he had sistered into the original timbers. I thought about him doing all of this without permits, because permits would have triggered a reassessment and raised his taxes, and because the kind of man who builds a secret basement under his own house is the kind of man who does not ask permission. I thought about his wife, upstairs, learning to not go down there, learning to not mention it, learning, after he died, to keep the door locked and to hand the key to strangers without explanation. None of that explained the water on the ceiling. I went back to the house 3 days later. I did not tell the office. I drove out on a Saturday in my own truck, in jeans, with a flashlight and a notebook, and the photographs printed out on letter paper. I told myself I was going to apologize for the intrusion and ask the woman a few follow-up questions for my own peace of mind, and then I was going to let it go. She opened the door before I knocked, the way she had the first time, and she said she had been expecting me. She said it without surprise and without warmth, the way you acknowledge a scheduled appointment you did not particularly want. She made coffee. We sat in the living room. The television was off. She asked me what I had seen down there, and I told her, slowly and carefully, with the photographs spread on the coffee table between us. She looked at each one without picking it up. When I was done, she was quiet for a long time, and then she said that her husband had told her, near the end, that the room filled up sometimes. That was how he had said it. The room fills up sometimes. He had told her not to go down when it was full. He had told her she would know it was full because the door at the top of the stairs would be cold to the touch, and there would be a sound, not loud, like a held breath. He had told her that if she ever opened the door when it was full, she should close it again and lock it and not open it again until the next morning, and that in the morning everything would be where it had been and nothing would be wet. She said the door had been cold the morning of the rain. She said she had not opened it. She said she had called the county because she did not know what else to do, and she had given them her husband's name and his old work number because she did not want her own name on anything official about that room. She said the number still rang somewhere. She did not know where, and that she had been answering it for 19 years whenever it rang, which was not often. I asked her what she thought was in the room when it filled. She said she did not know. She said her husband had not known either. She said he had only known the rules, and that he had figured the rules out the hard way, and that he had written them down for her on a piece of paper she kept in the drawer of the side table next to where I was sitting. She told me I could read it if I wanted. She said she would not stop me. She said she would also not stop me from leaving without reading it, and that she thought leaving without reading it was the better of the two choices, but that she was not going to make it for me. I opened the drawer. The paper was yellow at the edges and folded into quarters. The handwriting was a man's, careful, slanted, the kind of handwriting you learn in a Catholic school in the 1950s. The list was numbered. There were 7 items. The first item said, "The room fills between the hours of 3 and 5 in the morning, never in daylight. You will know it is filling because the door at the top of the stairs will be cold and the bolt will be hard to turn." The second item said, "Do not open the door while it is filling. Do not open the door while it is full. Wait until the door is warm again, which will be by 7 in the morning at the latest." The third item said, when you go down after, do not touch the ceiling. Do not stand on a chair to reach the ceiling. Do not replace the tiles even if they look bad. The tiles are the record. The record is what keeps it level. The fourth item said, if a tile falls on its own, put it back exactly where it was. The stain must be continuous around the room. If the stain breaks, the level will move. The fifth item said, the level has moved twice. In 1983, it moved up 4 inches in one night. In 1991, it moved down 2 inches and stayed there for a month. Both times I had been careless with the tiles. Both times I was able to put it back by replacing the tiles and waiting. The sixth item said, do not bring anyone down who does not already know. If you bring someone down who does not know, the level will notice them, and the level will adjust to include them. I do not know what including them means. I do not want to know. The seventh item said, if I am not here, and the level moves, call the number on the back of this paper. The man who answers will know what to do. He learned it from the man who built the original chamber, who learned it from his father. There has always been someone. There will always be someone. Do not let there not be someone. I turned the paper over. There was a phone number on the back, written in the same careful hand, with the area code of a county 2 over from ours. Below the number, in different ink, in a woman's handwriting, was a note that said, he passed in 2004. His son does not answer. I have not found anyone since. I sat in that living room for a long time with the paper in my hand. The woman drank her coffee. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, a dog barked once and stopped. I asked her finally why she had let me down there on the first visit if she knew the rule about not bringing people who did not know. She said because the rule said the level would adjust to include them. She said she had been alone in the house for 19 years and the level had stayed where her husband had left it, 3/4 of an inch below the joists. And she was 81 years old, and her knees were going, and she did not know what would happen to the room when she was gone. She said she had been waiting for someone to come who would notice the ceiling. She said she was sorry. She said she had not been sure it would work. She said she had only been sure that if it did work, the person it worked on would be someone like me. Someone who looked up in basements. Someone who knew what a tide line was. I asked her what she thought had happened to me. She said she did not know yet. She said I would know before she did. She said the way her husband had described it, it was not a fast thing. It was a slow noticing. The level learned you over weeks. It learned your height first, she thought, because that was the easiest measurement. Then it learned the rooms you slept in, then it learned the times you were still. She said she was telling me this so that I could decide what to do with the information. She said she was not asking me to take the room. She said she was only telling me that the room existed, and that the rules existed, and that there had always been someone, and that there was not someone now. I left her house around 3 in the afternoon. I took the paper with me. She did not ask for it back. I drove home the long way, along the Ridge Road, because I did not want to pass any of the other houses I had assessed that week. I did not want to look at any more water lines. When I got home, my wife was in the garden, and the dog was on the porch, and the light was the soft gold it gets in late August. And I sat in the truck in the driveway for a long time before I went inside. That was 4 months ago. I have not been back to the house. I closed the file. I did not upload the photographs to the county system, but I did not delete them either. They are in a folder on my home computer labeled with the claim number and nothing else. I look at them sometimes, late, when my wife is asleep. The stain is always at the same height in every photograph. I have measured it on the screen with a ruler, against fixed points in the frame, and it has not moved. I called the number on the back of the paper once. It rang for a long time, and then a man answered. He did not say hello. He said a name that was not mine and not the husband's, and he waited. I did not know what to say. I hung up. He has not called back, but the number is in my phone now, in the recent calls list, and I have not deleted it. In October, I started waking up at 3:14 in the morning. Not every night, 2 or 3 nights a week. I wake up flat on my back with my eyes already open, and I lie there until 5, and then I fall back asleep. My wife has not noticed. I have not told her. Last week, I went down into our own basement to change the furnace filter, which is a thing I do every 3 months, and I caught myself looking up at the joists before I looked at anything else. There is no drop ceiling in our basement. The joists are exposed. They were dry. They have always been dry. I stood there with the new filter in my hands, and I looked at the bottom edge of the rim joist where it meets the foundation, all the way around the room, and I confirmed that the wood was clean and unmarked. And I felt a relief that I do not want to examine too closely, because the relief implies that I had expected to find something else. I have started measuring my own height in the mornings. I do it against the door frame of our bedroom with a pencil, the way you do with a child. I have been the same height since I was 19 years old. I am still the same height. I check anyway. The woman called me last week. She used the office line, not my cell. She left a message with the receptionist. The message said only that the door had been cold that morning, and that she had not opened it, and that she wanted me to know. The receptionist passed it to me on a pink slip with a question mark at the bottom because she did not understand the message. I told her it was about a closed claim. I threw the slip away. I want to tell you that I am going to drive out there one more time. I want to tell you that I am going to go down those stairs and look at the ceiling and confirm that the line is still 3/4 of an inch below the joists, where the husband left it, where the woman has kept it, where it has been for over 40 years. I am not going to do that. I am going to keep the photographs. I am going to keep the paper, which is folded in my wallet now, behind my license. I am going to keep waking up at 3:14 for as long as that lasts. I am going to keep measuring myself against the doorframe. I am going to keep not telling my wife. And when the woman dies, which will be soon, because she is 81 and her knees are going and she lives alone, I am going to get a call from a lawyer or a niece or a county clerk telling me that my name was on a piece of paper in a drawer in her side table, listed as the person to contact about the property. And I am going to have to decide, in that moment, whether to drive out to that house with a key on a piece of green yarn and unlock a door that should not exist, and walk down a set of stairs into a room that fills with something that is not quite water, between the hours of 3 and 5 in the morning, and put the tiles back when they fall, and keep the stain continuous, and answer the phone when it rings, because there has always been someone, and there is not someone now, and the level is learning my height. I have not decided yet. But I notice that I have started, without meaning to keep a small notebook in the drawer of my own side table, and that the first page of it has a number on it, written in my own careful hand, and that the number is the one from the back of the husband's paper, and that below it, in the same ink, I have written, "He will not answer. Try anyway. I do not remember writing it. The handwriting is mine."